welcome back to Crime in Court. We are reading through the Delphi trial transcript, and today we are on the state's case, part 19, and we are going to read through the testimony of Sheriff Tony Liggett. And he wasn't the sheriff at the time. He actually was in an election for sheriff at the time when Richard Allen was arrested, which means that the arrest could have been possibly a political move to make it seem like, oh, I'm the guy who arrested the guy who did this horrific crime, even though he's not really the guy. At least Richard Allen's not really the guy. So basically, Tony Liggett arrested an innocent man to move his career along, at least allegedly, is what I will say. All right, so let us get into his testimony. All right, please hit the like button if you haven't done so already. All right, we are going to just dive right in. So, right where we left off yesterday, we completed the testimony of both Dan Doolin, Captain Dan Doolin, he was a DNR officer, Department of Natural Resources officer, and then also Stephen Mullen, who was the former Delphi chief. We heard from both of them in the last episode, and right, they didn't even take a break. They're just going straight into Tony Liggett here. And Mr. McClelland will be doing the questioning for the state. And he says, "Will you state your name, please?" "Tony Liggett." "And will you spell your name for the record, please?" And he does. "And how are you employed?" "I'm the Carroll County Sheriff." "And how long have you been how long have you been employed as a law enforcement officer in total?" 33 years. "And do you have to go through special education or training to be a law enforcement officer?" "You do." "Can you tell me a little bit about that?" "I've been at the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy. All law enforcement officers in Indiana are required to so many hours minimum of training. I've done numerous investigation trainings, basic firearm trainings, things like that." "Well, do you continue on with training on a yearly basis?" "Yes." I want to take you back to 2017. At that time, were you employed with the Carroll County Sheriff's Department?" "I was." "And what was your role during that time?" "I was a detective." "And were you involved in an investigation into the murder of Abby and Libby?" "Yes." "And did you participate in that investigation?" "I did." "I want to fast forward to September of 2022. What happened during that time?" "Kathy Shank brought me a tip lead." We still don't know what the tip lead was. What about the tip led you to Richard Allen other than he self-reported? That's the tip lead. His own self-reporting that he was there that day, which they knew already. So this isn't new. This isn't new information to them at all. They're just like, "Oh, this guy was there. Okay, this sounds like it could be a good guy to fit our crime just because he said he was there." I don't know. So Kathy Shank brought me a tip lead, a narrative from Lieutenant Dan Doolin for me to review. I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 232. Is this a tip lead that Ms. Shank gave you? Yes. And you recognize that tip lead? Is that correct? Yes. And once you had an opportunity to review that tip lead from Ms. Shank, why did that stick out in your mind? It really stuck out in my mind. I wasn't aware that anyone had seen Rayleigh Voorhees and Brianne Wilbur. I can't talk. Rayleigh Voorhees and Brianne Wilbur. We'd been looking to talk to that person that had passed them on the trails. So now they're saying that the person that passed that, because remember, they're the ones that described this like person who didn't speak to them and was in a hurry and didn't, was rude and was dressed in all black, but also the other person said he was dressed in something completely different. and nobody has like a really good explanation. And he didn't, the way that they described him in their statements didn't describe Bridge Guy, but yet when they were asked, was that person Bridge Guy, they said, yes, definitely 100% on a stand. That's what they said. Anyways. So I don't believe them, but they're saying that Richard Allen saw these two girls. Well, remember, it was Rayleigh Voorhees and Brienne Wilbur who were like the 16-year-olds who were like Kelsey's age, and then there were the 14-year-olds who were her younger sisters, one of their younger sisters, and they all went to the trails together that day and happened to see the Snapchat from Libby. So they knew that Libby was there. They knew of Libby. They knew who she was, but they weren't really friends with her. At least Rayleigh and Brienne weren't because they were the older ones. So they were looking for the person that Brienne and Rayleigh said that they saw that day, I guess. And why was it important for you to talk to that person that passed those three girls on the trail that day? We believe that was Bridge Guy. So, Sheriff Liggett, you were a part of the investigation when it began back in 2017. Is that correct? Yes. Are you familiar with the evidence and information that had been gathered during the investigation? Yes. And so you mentioned some names, Rayleigh Voorhees, Brienne, he says Brianna, he doesn't know his own witnesses' names, Wilbur. You are familiar with those two individuals? Yes. And what information from the investigation did you have about those two individuals? I'm sorry, say that one more time. I'm sorry. What information from your participation in the investigation did you have about Brianna, Wilbur, and Rayleigh Voorhees? It's Brianne. No E, no A at the end. We knew that they were out on the trails. We generally knew what time they were out on the trails and that they had passed a male as they were leaving the trails. They had passed a guy coming in. And were you familiar with pictures that had been taken by one of those three girls? Yes. I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit. State's Exhibit 211. Are you familiar with those pictures in that exhibit? Yes. And have you seen those pictures as part of the investigation? I have. And were you familiar with the timestamps on those pictures? Yes. And the last picture, what is the timestamp? 1:26 p.m. And why is that information important? Shortly after that picture was taken, that is when the girls passed the guy walking into the trails. And through your investigation, do you know where the trails the girls passed the individual that they ran to? Where on the trails? Do you know where on the trails the girls passed the individual that they ran into? I do. Can you tell me where? There's a bench closer to Freedom Bridge, the Blue Bridge, and the picture was taken at that bench. And if you would, could you approach the map and show us on the map where you're talking about? And this looks to be perhaps State's Exhibit 6, I believe. Can you show where on that map the girls ran into the male individual they described? It'd be right in this area. Okay, right in that area. Okay, go ahead and have a seat back at the witness stand, please. And you're aware, or were you aware? Well, let me back up. You also are familiar with an interview with Betsy Blair. Is that correct? Yes. And what information? I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 212. Are you familiar with that? Yes. And what is that? It is a Fitbit information from Betsy Blair's Fitbit that showed when she was out there walking. Was she out on the trail that day? Yes. And what time was she out on the trail? Based on the Fitbit, and we also had Hoosier Harvest Store video, she was on the video at 1:46 going to walk, and then she was leaving at 2:14. And did you see anybody on the trail? did she see anybody on the trail? She saw one male. And where was that male? On the first platform of the Monon High Bridge. You're also familiar with the evidence collected from Sarah Carbow, is that correct? Yes. And you're familiar that she also saw a male on that day? Yes. And can you describe that? Sarah, at 3:56, she's on the Hoosier Harvestor video going east, going away from Delphi, and there's a Mears residence, a parking area that some people use to park. She was just past that. Then there's a cemetery, and the male was walking towards Delphi, west on the north side of the road. Before we continue, I just want to remind you that in the picture I just revealed on the screen, you can see the Are We Being Gaslit? That's Richard Allen in his obviously his prison garb. Whoops, what happened? I lost my thing. And then behind him there are two different police sketches. The one to your left is the one that Sarah Carbow came up with or described to the police, and then the one to your right is the one that Betsy Blair described to police. Very, very different individuals. But the state keeps trying to make it seem like it's one person. They have always now they're claiming that they've always said it's only been one person, when in the past they've said perpetrators, or they're suspects. And in the past they've been thinking that there might have been multiple people involved, the way that they talked about this case. And now that they've been gaslighting us, now that Richard Allen has been arrested, telling us it's just the one guy. We never had two. What? Even though there's two police sketches, it's the same dude or something, is pretty much their excuse. So I just wanted to remind you of the different, very, very different. Okay, here we go. Very, very different police sketches that we have there. Okay, so he described Sarah Carbow's description. And you're also familiar through the investigation of evidence that was collected at the crime scene. And what I mean by crime scene is where the bodies of the two girls were found, correct? Correct. And specifically, are you familiar with the bullet that was found there? Yes. Can you tell me about that bullet? It was a .40 caliber Winchester bullet. I love the show Supernatural, by the way, and my boyfriend and I are going through it right now. I used to watch it like back in the day, the Winchesters, that is their names, so that made me think of that. Anyways, a little love for Sam and Dean. So he says it was a .40 caliber Winchester bullet. Are you also familiar with LG's cell phone? Yes. And where was it found? Underneath Abby Williams. And what information were you able to gather, at least in part, from the cell phone? I watched the video. So that 43-second video of of Abby on the bridge that Libby took of her phone, on her phone, that we've gone over on here before. And what did the video depict? A man in what appeared to be like a blue jacket and blue jeans walking behind Abby Williams. And the man walking behind Abby Williams, what did you commonly refer to him as? Bridge guy. So there you have it. Tony Liggett came up with the term bridge guy. Now, you've seen the original video from the cell phone, is that correct? Correct. You've also examined, well, have you examined the video in other formats? Yes. Can you tell me about that? There are enhanced formats of that. There's enhanced audio, there's enhanced video. One of the ones that I've watched, it stabilizes the video and keeps everything upright. So as the video's moving, the way they enhanced it would be kept everything upright as if the phone didn't necessarily move. He's talking about orientation. So it went from like landscape to portrait to back to landscape or whatever. I don't know. However it went, but you know what I'm saying. What else is particular about that enhanced video that you watched? At one point, it pauses and it zooms in on Bridge Guy and then it pulls back. Well, that's their camera work because that never happened in the Abby or the Libby video. That is something that they did in their enhanced video. So by enhanced, it means they altered it in some way, shape, or form. It's been altered, so you can't trust that it's the original format of the video. You can't trust basically how we've seen that Bridge Guy was tall and large, and then they squished him to be short and wide in the image that they released to the public. So you can't trust their enhanced versions because all it means is that it's been altered. Um so yeah, it never at no point does Libby's video ever zoom in on the Bridge Guy because they're never even paying attention to Bridge Guy until he talks to them in the video. Is that a video you've watched several times? Yes. And does that video contain the same information as the original video? Yes. And again, you said it's enhanced in terms of what was that? It's stabilized? Yeah, stabilized. And it keeps things upright. Correct. You were there other enhancements? Like you just stop at that? You were able to examine that video before court today, is that correct? Yes. And you saw that I put it on the thumb drive, is that correct? Yes. And the video that's on that thumb drive is the video you're referring to, is that correct? Correct. Judge, the state would move to admit what's been marked as State's Exhibit 246. No objection, says Rosie. All right, without objection, 246 is admitted. Judge, this may take a second, but I'd ask to be able to play this for the jury. She says, you may. And that is the video that you viewed. Is that correct? Correct. How many times do you think you viewed that video? Hundreds of times. Have you viewed it on different devices? I have. I've listened to it on my laptop. I've listened to it with external speakers. The best way that I listen to it is with headphones on. And why is that the best way to listen? It cuts out all the noise, anything, just ambient noise around you, as well as you can hear things better. And when you've listened to this video and viewed this video, have you formed an opinion about what is said in this video? Yes. Okay, get a load of this crap. After listening to the video and forming that opinion, can you tell the jury what you hear in the video? This should never be allowed because the video speaks for itself. I don't know why they're not objecting here. Video speaks for itself, and they should have some kind of instruction that the jury, can determine what the video says. But no, here we have the very, very biased Sheriff Tony Liggett telling us what the video says. You don't listen to your own ears, listen to him. He knows what it says. So when the video starts, the first words that I hear Abby Williams say as she's walking across the bridges, she says, "Is he right there? Is he right here?" I never heard that. Next, Abby Williams says, "Don't leave me up here." And then Libby German starts talking about, "See, this is the path." And then her tone of voice changes and she says, kind of whispers, "That be a gun." That's not even grammatically correct. That's not how you would say, "There's a gun." You wouldn't say, "That be a gun." Like, how stupid does Tony Liggett think we are that we hear that? Because to me, it sounded like, "See, this is the path that we go down." which makes much more sense than that be a gun. Because those two phrases are together, like in the same sentence, like the same breath. She pauses in between. She's like, see, this is the path that we go down, not that be a gun. This is the path that be a gun. Who talks like that? Anyways, moving on. And then she goes on to say, there's no path here. We have to go down this way. And then you hear a male's voice say, guys. They respond with hi. I'm not even sure if they do because it sounds more like they kind of were startled, like they're gasping, like you know, instead of saying hi. But maybe one says hi and the other one gasps. I don't know. Maybe it's a combo of the two, but it doesn't quite to me sound like they're saying hi. Judge says, sorry, Mr. Rosie says, Judge, I'm going to object. He's inserting facts that are not evidence. I think that's mischaracterizing the evidence. Sustained. So he did object, but it was way after he did all that and said all of that. Um, Mr. McClelland says, once you hear, Rosie says, move to strike that comment from the record. Sorry, Mr. McClelland. Mr. McClelland says, it's okay. The court says, strike it. She doesn't even give an instruction to the jury saying you're to disregard everything that he just said in that last answer. Just to make sure I'm correct, Mr. Rosie, just the statement about the gun? Yes. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Judge. After you hear the male in the video say, guys, what do you hear next from the male? Down the hill. And you had all this information as of September in 2022, is that correct? Correct. And then this new piece of information is brought to you by Ms. Schenk that involved a male on the trail. Is that correct? Correct. Okay. After you looked at that lead sheet, what did you do next? I called the prosecutor investigator, Stephen Mullen, and told him what we had located. Did you attempt to do any research on Richard Allen? Yes, we did research on Richard Allen. And what did you find? One of the things we were looking for was whether or not he owned what vehicles belonged to him. And what vehicles did you find that were registered to Richard Allen? A 2016 Ford Focus and a 2006 Ford 500. Did you find any information about where he was employed? Yeah, we learned he was employed at CVS in Delphi. So, with that vehicle information and his place of employment, what did you do next? I went to CVS and found the vehicle and took a picture of it. I'm going to show you what's been marked as States Exhibit 244 and 245. Are those the pictures, two of the pictures that you took at CVS? Yes. In those pictures, the vehicle, is it pulled straight into the parking space or is it backed in? Backed in. The fact that it's backed in, did that spike your interest? Because somebody backed in their car? People back in their cars all the time. These cops would not do well in a city like Chicago because apparently everything is a crime to them or suspicious. It makes you think that somebody's about to commit a crime, like backing your car into a stall. Okay. People do that here all the time. It's so much better because you can just pull out and not have to back out into traffic and things. It's better for your vision, your view when you leave. But anyways, that's suspicious apparently to Tony Liggett. Just as the people that saw the vehicle at the old CPS building said that it was backed into the parking place in an area that people didn't normally park. After you had that information, what did you do? Oh, sorry, that was his answer. It was backed into a place where people don't normally park. I'm sorry, don't people always park in this area to go to the Mears or not the whatever the to go to walk on the trails? Don't they park in any of the areas that's around there that they can? After you had that information, what did you do next? Again, just more investigation on who Richard Allen was, what he did. We learned he had a lifetime handgun permit. Did you review video from the blah. Did you review video from the Hoosier Harvest store? We did. And did you compare the pictures that you took at CVS to vehicles you saw passing on the video of the Hoosier Harvest store? Yes, we did. And were you ever able to find on that video a vehicle that matched the description of Richard Allen's vehicle? Yes, we did. What key aspects did you look at in the video that led you to believe it matched the description of Richard Allen's vehicle? Just the general outline of the vehicle on the video. You could see daylight through the wheels, the type of wheels that it had on. You could see through Richard Allen's vehicle as well. Okay. After you did that, did you make contact with Richard Allen? We did. How did they know that you could see through Richard Allen's vehicle? They said it was through the wheels, the tires, or something as they were in motion. You could see through them or something. How does he know that? Did they test drive Richard Allen's actual car to see if that's how it looked on the Hoosier Harvest store video? Because if they didn't, then how do they know it was Richard Allen's car on that video? After you did that, did you make contact with Richard Allen? We did. And did you interview him? We did. We went to his house and asked him to come over and do an interview with us about this case. And what did he say during the interview? He admitted that he was on the trails on February 13th, 2017. He changed his time. He had told Lieutenant Dan Doolin that he was there from 1:30 to 3:30. When we interviewed him, he changed his time to noon to 1:30. He described that he had went back home and got a jacket. He owned a blue or a black Carhartt jacket and went back out on the trails. We asked him about any kind of head covering that he had, and he said that he kept a skull cap in the pocket of his jacket. Did he inform you where he parked when he went on the trails that day? He was kind of wishy-washy about where he parked, but he said he did not park at Mears Farm, so across from that farm on 300 North. Eventually, he basically said he probably had parked at the old CPS building. They had parked there before. And did he tell you which route of travel he took once he was on the trails? He went towards Monon High Bridge. Did he tell you that he ran into anybody while he was on the trail? Yeah, he talked about seeing three girls on the trails that he had passed close to the Freedom Bridge. Did he describe those three girls? I don't remember if he described them in that interview, but he did to Dan Doolin. Did he tell you which direction on the trail the girls were traveling? They were going towards Freedom Bridge, so leaving High Bridge Trail. That would be in the opposite direction he was traveling? Correct. Did he inform you if he saw anybody else on the trail? He said that he saw nobody else on the trail. Did he inform you what vehicle he was driving that day? He said that normally when he went out of town, so, like, he explained that if he was going to go to Lafayette, he would drive that vehicle as the 2006 Ford 500 wasn't as reliable as the newer vehicle. He had went to see his mom that morning in Peru, Mexico, Indiana. So it was possible that he drove that car, the newer car, the Ford Focus. So when you say that car, which car do you mean? The Ford Focus, the 2016 Ford Focus. Okay. And did he state whether or not he went out on the high bridge that day? He did. And what was his statement? He stated that he went out on the first platform to look at fish. Did he ask, or did you ask him if he owned any firearms? I don't think we asked him there, but when we were at his house and I invited him to come and speak with us, we were in his garage and he told a story, a recent story about there was someone in his yard and he took his gun and went outside to confront them or see what they were doing, something along those lines. And it turned out it was a police officer, so we knew that he had a gun. Okay. After the interview was over, what did you do next? I wonder if that officer in his yard was investigating him and got caught by Richard Allen, right? I mean, that's weird. Anyways, after the interview was over, what did you do next? We applied to get a search warrant. On what grounds? Again, on what grounds? Because he had a gun and he was there that day. Could have been anybody that had the same circumstances. And that could be anybody in that town pretty much because many people it's a gun owning town. So, anyways, after the interview was over, what did you do next? We applied to get a search warrant. And did you search Richard Allen's home? We did. Did you participate in that search? Yes, I did. You found several items in that search of his home, is that correct? Correct. There was one item in particular. What item do you want to draw the jury's attention to? It was a Sig Sauer handgun, 40 caliber. And why is that important? The lab had told us, I don't want you telling me what the lab told you, but why is it important that it's a 40 caliber Sig Sauer gun? That was the same caliber of the bullet that we found at the scene. But isn't a 40 caliber bullet like real common? So how do we know that it was Richard Allen's? When you mean at the scene, what do you mean? Between the girls. Between the bodies of Abby Williams and Libby German? Correct. You also participated in a search of the master bedroom in the home. Is that correct? Correct. And you found other ammunition. Is that correct? Correct. Can you tell me about that? We found another 40 caliber Winchester round in a keepsake box, a hope box. It was a box that I saw there were some pictures. There appeared to be a letter, a keepsake box. And where was this box located? I believe it was in his dresser. And was there only one round of ammunition in that box? Correct. And it was a 40 caliber Winchester, is that right? Correct. Was that the same brand as what was found at the crime scene? Yes. Another very, very common piece of ammunition, and yet they just see it as like automatic guilty, guilty, guilty. And it's like based on what? Was there other 40 caliber ammunition found in the home? There was. Tell me about that. It was the brand name Blazer, so it wasn't Winchester, but it was Blazer 40 caliber. Did you find any other 40 caliber Winchester ammunition in the home besides the one round in the Hope box? No. Did you find clothing in the home? We did. Did you find any clothing that is significant to this investigation? Yeah, we found a blue Carhartt jacket. And where was that found? I believe it was in the main entry closet. The items that you found in the home, did you send those to the lab? We did. And why did you do that? They were They could compare the bullet that they had that we found at the scene to the gun that we found in Richard Allen's house. So the gun that you found was sent to the lab, is that correct? Correct. I want to back up just a little bit because I forgot to ask you an omitted question. Where did you find the 40 caliber Sig Sauer gun? It was in like a nightstand right beside his bed. Was there any indication, this may be an unfair question, is there any indication whose side of the bed it was found on? There was clothing on the floor on that side of the bed that belonged to Richard. Was it male clothing? Yes. How did you know that? Well, it was like CVS clothing, I believe. Okay. After you completed the search of the house, did you run the information for the gun through any kind of a database? Yeah, we did an ATF trace on the gun. And when you do an ATF trace, what information do you get back? The owner information, where it was purchased, who it's registered to, things like that. And did you run the information for the 40 caliber Sig Sauer gun that you found in the nightstand? I did. And who did that gun return to? Richard Allen. Did it also give you information on who owned the gun prior? It showed that he was the only owner of the gun. I don't have any other questions, Judge. Thank you. Court says, Mr. Rosie? Thank you, Judge. So, Mr. Liggett, Sheriff Liggett, you were in October of 2022, when you were started interviewing Mr. Allen, you were a detective? Is that right? Correct. Or were you the chief deputy? Yes, I was the chief deputy at the time. Second in charge? Correct. And you were in an active election at the time, weren't you? Yes. And in fact, you had survived a primary election in May, right? Correct. But you were still in a contested race in November, correct? And these interviews took place in October? Real suspicious timing there. Correct. And you were working on this case as part of the Unified Command, is that right? Correct. And so you had been working on this case during the time, I presume, that you decided you were going to run for sheriff? Correct. And there's a big raise from the deputy's position up to the sheriff's position, isn't there? Judge, I guess I would object to the relevance about what the pay scale is between the two. And the court asks, how is this relevant? The relevance is, says Mr. Rosie, is that it has a tendency to prove that he would have benefited from an arrest in the case right before the election. Mr. McLeland says, Judge, is the implication that the defense is making that he made an arrest to better his position in the election? Based on what evidence? I'm sorry, says Mr. Rosie. The court says, based on what evidence is the question. The implication is that he was going to benefit from the arrest in this case in that election. Overruled. I'm surprised she allowed that. Could you ask that question again, says the witness. How much more do you make as a sheriff than you do when you're a chief deputy? Probably about $50,000. That's a lot. So double, basically? Yeah. Did you ever, for a minute, think about how an arrest of a suspect prior to that election would impact your chances of winning ever for 1 minute? It had nothing to do with me. It was about two little girls that were murdered. Well, did you ever think for 1 minute about how that arrest might have impacted? Objection, asked and answered. Mr. Rosie says, he didn't answer my question. The court says he did. Sustained. He actually didn't, because if you go back, did you ever, for a minute, think about how an arrest of a suspect prior to that election would impact your chances of winning ever for 1 minute? He says it had nothing to do with me. It was about two little girls that were murdered. But he didn't answer the question. The question was, did you ever for a minute think about what it would do for your career? So he didn't answer the question, Judge Gull, but let's move on. He says, may I continue? She says, yes. He says, thank you. So we've talked about search parties. You know what search parties are, right? Yes. And you agree that on the afternoon of February the 13th, 2017, that there were search parties that were essentially sent out to the High Bridge area. Correct. And that included many areas around the bridge, right? Correct. And that involved some lay people, correct? Lay people, is that what? Yes. Yes, correct. Some of the local town residents, right? Correct. And some law enforcement officers? Correct. And other mutual aid providers, right? Yes. And that started, I think, from what we heard, maybe around 5 o'clock. Does that sound about right? I think it was a little bit after, but yes. And that search was expanded that afternoon or that evening, wasn't it? Yes. And at some point, there were dozens and dozens of people out there assisting, weren't there? There were a lot, yes. The fire department was deployed, is that right? Correct. Mr. Starrett, I think, and his team. Correct. And these teams were dispatched in all areas around the bridge, weren't they? Yeah, as far as I know, yes. There was actually a command post set up on the south side of the bridge on that private lane, wasn't there? No. Well, yeah, I'm probably using the wrong words. That means something to you. Do you agree that they set up some kind of emergency units down there on the Weber Lane on the south side of the bridge? No. Lighting and things like that? No. You weren't familiar with that. No. Hmm. Okay. And that went on until at least midnight. Is that right? Yes, something right around that area. Yes. And there's a man in town named Carl Abbott, right? Correct. He owns the funeral home down the street? Yes. And at the time, back in 2017, he lived on the whatever 300 North would be running east. He lived down that road, right? Correct. That road, 300 North, curves to the south just a bit when you pass the cemetery. Is that correct? Correct. And is it still 300 North? Yes. Okay. And does Mr. Abbott live in the area somewhere? I don't know if he still does, but he did. Yes. Right. And the search in this case on the 13th actually extended as far down as behind his house, didn't it? I don't know. Are you aware that there were people searching in the field behind his house? I'm not clear on that. No. Hmm. Seems like there's things going on that he didn't know about, and he's part of Unified Command. So why didn't he know? Why doesn't he know about this? I'm confused. Are you aware that there were people searching in the field? He says, I'm not clear. Now, let's talk about the crime scene. We've talked about this a little bit, but you're aware of the phrase crime scene integrity, right? Yes. And do you acknowledge that early on in this case, there were some breaches of integrity at that crime scene? No. Some of the photos got out, right? When are we talking about? 2017, very early in the investigation. Nothing's coming to mind. The state leaked some photos at some point in time back in 2017. This was long before the whole photo leak with Andy Baldwin's office, where his friend and trusted colleague took photos and leaked them. That was long after after Richard Allen had been arrested. But this is a leak that happened really early on, and it's very likely law enforcement was the source of those leaks. And he's saying he doesn't remember any leaks. So that's convenient, isn't it? Okay. Are you aware that there have been serious leaks in the communication about this investigation? Yeah, there was some information that got out, yes. And at one point, I asked you if you had directed other law enforcement officers not to talk about the facts of the case while the investigation was going on, and you told me you never issued any kind of gag order, did you? No, I don't think so. It's a small town, right? it wouldn't have been my place to issue a gag order, so to speak. Were you the detective back in 2017, or were you the chief deputy? I had just become a detective in 2016. How many other detectives are there in the department? One. Anybody else on the department that you're aware of tell the rest of the officers don't talk about this case? Not to my knowledge. And at that crime scene, we talked about the sticks that were on the girls. Is that right? Yes. And you thought maybe they were used for concealment. That was your explanation for them, right? Correct. But you would agree with me that whoever did this did a pretty poor job of concealing them, didn't he? Nobody saw them. Um, they weren't covered, sir. What do you mean nobody saw them? They were not hidden. Well, the sticks weren't covering their bodies, were they? But nobody saw them. But the sticks weren't covering their bodies. Objection asked and answered sustained. He didn't know. He didn't answer the question at all. Now, Sheriff, let's talk about Betsy Blair. Are you familiar with her? Yes. Actually, you mentioned earlier that Mr. McLeland asked you about the fact that you were aware of other various aspects of this investigation, right? Correct. And one of those is that you were aware of what Ms. Blair had said and what she saw that day. Correct. And Ms. Carbow, I think you mentioned earlier, is that right? Correct. And Bree Wilbur? Correct. And Rayleigh Voorhees? Correct. And at some point in September or October of 2022, you decided you were going to seek a search warrant for Mr. Allen's residence, right? Correct. Whiteman Drive, 1967, I think. I believe you're correct. Yes. And that search warrant's something you do on occasion as a law enforcement officer, right? Yes. And that search warrant, basically, for those on the jury that aren't really educated about this, is essentially kind of like an affidavit where you swear to certain facts and you offer that up to a judge, right? Correct. And you did that in this case. Yes. And that search warrant, those facts, are what the judge would rely on to determine whether or not the warrant should be issued, and you could go into somebody's home, like in this case, right? Correct. And in this particular case, part of your search warrant was focused on, well, the biggest part of your search warrant was focused on the timeline that we've been talking about, right? Correct. And in your timeline, you have articulated facts about what each of these witnesses saw based on their statements on the dates in question, right? Correct. When's the last time you looked at the affidavit for the search warrant? Within a week. So a week ago or so? Within this week, yeah. Okay, and would you agree with me that one of those witnesses that you discussed in your search warrant was Bree Wilbur? Correct. And isn't it accurate to say that you never offered up any information about a man being tall and muscular as Bree Wilbur described? Bam. He says, I don't specifically remember what I put in there from Bree Wilbur. Would it help me to hand you your probable cause affidavit? Yes, sir. May I approach, Judge? You may. Let me direct your attention, if you would. It's kind of informally labeled down here, Sheriff, page 3 of 8. Page 3? Yeah. They're marked on the left side. They're kind of cut off. The top of that page, I'm going to let you read this first before I ask a question, but the top of the page, you'd agree with me that actually the first letters are RW, right? BW or BW. McLeland says, Judge, while he's doing that, may we approach? She says, yeah. Brief sidebar here, Judge. I'm not sure what's developing. I'm not real sure where he's going. I'm trying not to stop him prematurely. I'm so gracious. I think he's going to try to challenge the validity of the search warrant. This has already been addressed by the court. The court says, Mr. McLellan says, that's my concern. Miss Rosie says, credibility of the witness is always in question, obviously, and he's sworn to facts that supported a search warrant or anything involved in this case, and I'm able to impeach him on those facts or statements. Mr. McLellan says, I disagree. He's trying to say that this backs up the search warrant, that the search warrant's not valid. He's trying to impeach him. For this search warrant to be found invalid, he's trying to impeach him. He's trying to imply he lied on the search warrant. We know you lied. For the information to impeach, the search warrant was found to be valid by this court. So Judge Gull thinks that the search warrant's valid. So that just proves to me that it's not. Mr. Rosie says, Judge, the purpose of the cross examination in this regard is to prove that the witness statements are also inconsistent. If you've got him reporting one thing and the witnesses are reporting another, then it goes to the credibility of the witnesses as well. I already know that the warrants we've already challenged that. I'm holding the blanket for you. Can you go? I'm recording, please. My dog has to be a pain in the butt. He said, the court says, yeah, so it's already been challenged. Mr. Rosie says, done. This is about impeachment. This is about credibility, and it's not only about his credibility, but the credibility of those other witnesses. Court says, did you challenge the other witnesses with that? Well, I'm challenging them through this witness. Mr. McLellan says, I disagree with that, Judge. I don't think challenging inconsistently inaudible. Is that our first inaudible? It might be. It's his sworn statement. It's just like an affidavit. It's what it is, says Mr. Rosie. The court says, I understand, but you kept asking about the statements that are contained within that, not about inaudible. Complete that. Or are you trying to impeach the witness? He says, I'm not arguing with that. Court says, well, then what are you arguing? He says, I told you I'm using this to impeach the other witnesses. Court says, you're using this to impeach? Yes. Other witnesses? Mr. Rosie says, the lack of through him? Yeah. She says, that's improper impeachment. You can impeach those witnesses, not him through this. Mr. Rosie says, I think I can point out the discrepancies that's relevant. But you're trying to impeach him when those aren't his statements. You're trying to impeach the evidence. You didn't confront them with this statement. That's improper. That's proper impeachment. Not, you mean with this warrant? Yeah. Well, you wouldn't allow me to. You didn't try. All right. Okay. Sidebar conference concluded. Well, that was unhelpful. She says, I'll sustain your objection. Mr. Rosie says, thank you, Judge. Sheriff Liggett, did you report to the judge in this case that Bree Wilbur described the man as being muscular? Judge, I'm going to object. Same objection as we dialed up at sidebar. Sustained. Are you freaking kidding me? Bree Wilbur makes a statement about the man that she saw being muscular and tall. This a-hole didn't put that in his report. And the evil witch that is Judge Gull is like, no, you can't bring it in. I'm not going to let you. You can't do that. You can't even bring it up. That's my mind's blown on that one. That one's a big, like, why? Okay. Sheriff Liggett, let's talk about this Hoosier Harvest Store video. Okay. You're aware that there was a video camera at the Hoosier Harvest Store? Yes. And you're aware of the general location of that camera? Yes. And that camera was facing 300 north. Is that correct? Correct. And you're aware that Ms. Carbow described, uh, Mr. Rosie says, Max, could you pull that map up, please? So he's pulling up a map for the jurors and the witness to see. Mr. Rosie says, may I judge? Yes. So what was the beginning of that question? And you're aware that Ms. Carbow described that she saw a muddy guy and a bloody guy walking west on 300 North. Is that right? Correct. And I'm going to let them pull this up here. Sorry, I'm not a techie guy. I'm sorry. Mr. Rosie says, thank you, Max. And if I could assist, can you see the map from here? Yes. You're aware that Ms. Carbow indicated that she saw this person walking west on 300 North, correct? Correct. Somewhere between the cemetery and the Mears connector, correct? Correct. And there's only one video camera out there that you're aware of, right? Correct. Did you ever look to see if there was any security cameras on the back of the Hoosier Harvest store? Did you ever ask Mr. Inaudible? That'd be a good name, Mr. Inaudible. A good superhero name. You can't hear him. Sorry. I did not. No. Okay. Because this camera we're talking about here, it's up there on the front, kind of the southwest corner, right? Correct. Of this structure here, there's several storage units that extend northward, right? Yes. I mean, just to give the jury an idea, because you've been out there, I'm assuming, right? Yes. I mean, the distance from the front of this Hoosier Harvest store to the back, what, 100 yards or so? I think that's fair. Like a football field or so. Sure. And then there's some area back here uh, where there's some storage stuff. Property behind the Hoosier Harvest store, like another lot, that I don't know about. Do you see it on that image? I see it, yes. All right, so this individual she described as walking west on 300 North should have been seen on that security camera if that individual would have continued towards the CPS lot. A pretty simple conclusion to draw, right? Correct. There's no individual on the CPS video, is that right? There's no individual on a CPS. I'm sorry, CPS on the Hoosier Harvest Store video. Correct. So in other words, you don't see anybody walking by. Correct. And there's only really two options at that point, maybe three, right? Correct. What individual would have had to either oh, so that individual would have had to either reroute south back into the woods, correct? Correct. Or maybe we can get maybe southwest, kind of towards the Mears connector or the back of the Mears connector, right? Correct. What we would call the junction here, where the trail and the Mears connector meet? Correct. Or that individual could have gone north through this open field, right? Correct. Or north through this farm property. Correct. Th- There were people living at the Mears farm at the time, wasn't there? No. There's nobody living in that home at the time? No. Was this an active farm? I believe it was an active farm, but I don't believe there was anybody living there. And that hard to believe. They were using that farm. It was an I know there was a farm. They kept some of their farm stuff there. How active, I don't know. Okay. And so basically, then whoever that person was, they just say let's just say they took this option here, which is the southwest option down towards the Mears connector to the trail. There were actually people at the Mears connector when Carbow went by, right? Correct. So there's a pretty good chance they might have seen somebody, correct? And having been out there, would you agree with me, especially in February when the visibility's good, you'd be able to see at least in part along this strip between 300 and the trail? It's not a big, wide space there, is it? It's pretty thick. In February, the visibility was good, wasn't it? So, like there might be thick brush and stuff during the summer, but in February there's no leaves anywhere, so you should be able to see through the foliage. And he says, I don't know that I would say it's very good. It's still a pretty thick portion of woods, so he's not even going to give him that. Okay. Did you ever send any search party out to search this area between 300 and the Monon High Bridge Trail moving west for any kind of discarded clothing items? I did not. No. Are you aware if that was ever done? I don't know. Are you aware of any search that was done either onto or up north around the Mears property in this open cornfield for any items? I don't know about the open cornfield part. No. Okay. And then moving westward, either the Hoosier Harvest Store property or something north of here, wherever these searches that were done up in that area, I had no decision making of sending anybody out there. No. But are you aware of any searches that were done? No. I mean, you were on the Unified Command, right? Like the head honchos that were investigating this case? He says, correct. So one of the kind of head guys in this investigation for a couple of years at least. Yeah, I was the number two for our department, yes. And there's if this individual would have gone northward, there's at least is this a fence line here behind the Mears property? I don't know. You see the field line, the divider there? It could just be a separate, I don't know if it's a fence line, if there's a fence there or not. It could just be a strip between the two fields. Well, after Sarah Carbow came in and provided her information to the police, are you aware of anybody that went out and maybe looked in that area? I'm not aware of anybody, no. I mean, you scored this investigation and those documents over and over for the last 5, 6, 7 years, haven't you? Correct? And that just information just doesn't exist to the best of your knowledge, right? I have not seen it. Okay. Same question about the Hoosier Harvest Store. There's a fence line here, right? I don't know. Can you see the line there? I see a line. I don't know if there's a fence. Will this look consistent with what it might have looked like back in 2017? Could be. And then moving westward before you get to the CPS lot, there's another wooded area, right? Correct. And that wooded area has some railroad tracks alongside it. Correct. And there was a lot of growth in there too, right? Correct. And that was private property as well. Yes. I assume I'm taking a guess the Anderson family. I believe that was the Andersons, correct. Are you aware of anybody that ever searched in that area for any evidence in this case? I'm not aware. In terms of that particular area, is it possible that whoever this was could have rerouted themselves down back towards the crime scene? Possible. Okay. Could have went the other direction at some point, right? Possible. And we know there was some people here at the connector, right? Correct. They didn't see anything? No. You're aware that Sarah Carbow has provided some, I'll say it politely, some inconsistent statements about what she saw? You'd have to describe what you mean by inconsistent. Well, we can get into this muddy/bloody thing, but you're aware that during her early interviews, she used one of the terms, and during her later interviews, she used another, right? She used muddy in the very first interview, and then days later, she used muddy and bloody, correct? Days later, she used bloody, and then they were combined later, right? That's not my understanding of it. No, it is the truth. Okay, is it possible that your understanding of it is wrong? If you could show me that it is wrong, I would agree. Well, we heard Sarah Carbow the other day. Okay, so they can make up their own decisions, but is it possible you're just wrong? Is it possible that I'm wrong? Yeah, I haven't seen what you're saying. No. So he won't even concede that it's a possibility he may be wrong, even though he doesn't know what he's talking about. Okay. That you may have conflated these two things together? I may have conflated them together. Is that what you said? Yeah. Is that possible? No, I read it in a report. Okay, you reported that she told you muddy and bloody, right? No, I said that she said muddy and bloody. Okay. What? Is it possible that Sarah Carbow didn't see anybody that day? Is that possible? No, I don't believe. Well, she spent 3 weeks panicking over this. Did you know that? No. Do you think it's odd that it took her 3 weeks to call to provide some basic information about seeing somebody on a trail? No. As a law enforcement officer, when did you learn at some point did you learn that it was a 3 week delay in her reporting that she saw the muddy or bloody, however you want to look at it, person that road on the in the road? Did you know that there was a 3 week? Yes, there was. No. Okay. You never realized that? No. Okay. She ever tell you that she was panicking during the whole time? No. If you knew somebody was panicking about something like this, would that cause some concern in a law enforcement officer about what that witness's ability to perceive an event? No, two girls lost their lives. I can understand panic if you think you saw the person that took their lives. But the impact of that panic on her brain, do you think that that would impact what she recited or how she recited what she saw? Judge, I'm going to object. It's to impact her memory. It's been asked and answered. It's speculative. I'm going to object, Judge. Sustained. Judge, he's a law enforcement officer. He interviews witnesses all the time. I think it's relevant that a witness's perception would be impacted by their mental state. It has a tendency to prove that she's less credible. Court says the objection was speculation. Thank you very much. You talked about identifying this Ford Focus, right? That you went and got on the computer and determined that Rick Allen owned a Ford Focus, right? Correct. And would you agree with me? I mean, a Ford automobile is not that rare, right? Just in and of itself. A Ford, sure, there's lots of Fords. And there's lots of Ford Focuses too, aren't there? Sure. And there's lots of dark colored Ford Focuses? Sure. So just that in and of itself is not entirely unique, is it? No, the fact that he said that he was there at 1:30 and the vehicle on there at 1:30. Okay, we're going to talk about that in a minute before you jump ahead of me. He says, "Okay. And do you think that this car is the only Ford Focus that had those kinds of rims, if that's what it is? I don't know how many had those kinds of rims. Okay. You never checked that, right? I believe there may be information on that. Yes. I mean, I hate to quibble about this, but they probably made thousands of those kinds of cars, didn't they? I don't know. I don't know. Well, would you be surprised to find that Ford mass produced these things? No. The FBI assisted you in this case, in this investigation at a time. Is this right? Yes. And that occurred early on in this case, right? Yes. And in fact, we heard earlier that as the investigation kind of progressed or involved, that there became kind of a more of a cohesive approach to the investigation. Does that sound kind of accurate in terms of the totality of the investigation and who was handling it? I guess I don't understand what you're saying. Do you agree with me that early on in the investigation that there were a lot of moving parts? Yes, and personnel. Correct. And in terms of the way the computer systems were used, case management systems, all those kinds of things? Correct. And do you agree with me that there was some general disorganization in that process? It took time to get that worked out? Yeah, in the very first days, yes. Well, and do you agree with me that part of that disorganization involved the FBI? No, they helped. Okay, they assisted you, right? Correct. And do you agree with me that there were tensions? Mr. McClellan says, Judge, I'm going to object to the form of the question. I'll let it slide a few times, but I'm going to object to the form of the question. He says, I'll clean it up. Sustained. Thank you. I'm sorry. Do you agree that there became tensions between the local law enforcement community and the FBI? No. Okay. Do you agree that at one point in this case, in 2019, essentially the FBI was relieved of their responsibilities in this case by Superintendent Doug Carter? He's basically like the face of this case because he did so many interviews out there. Judge, I'm going to object. It calls for speculation. Sustained. Why is that speculation? Because it's not speculation. It's asking, do you know at some point the FBI was relieved of their responsibilities in this case? How's it speculation? Was there a time in this investigation when the FBI was no longer involved? Yes. Well, no. Even after year 2019, if I still needed something from the FBI, I called them. But they were told not to. They weren't participating. I don't know. You don't know that? No. Would you be surprised to find that out? I'm surprised as I sit here. Okay. So he doesn't know that at some point the FBI was kicked off of this case from local law enforcement. Whoever that was, I don't know. But somebody was like, FBI, we don't need you anymore. And the FBI is like, sure, okay, bye. Mm, weird, right? Okay. Now, the first interview with Rick Allen was in October of 2017. Is that right? I'm sorry, one more time. Pay attention, buddy. The first interview that the law enforcement team did with Rick Allen, October of 2017, right? Strike that. Let me ask a better question. Officer Doolin obviously interviewed him in February of 2017, right? Correct. And then in October of 2022, he was interviewed more formally by your team. Correct. And so 5 years later. Correct. Yes? Yes. And he was not considered a suspect at any point in time in this investigation between 2017 and 2022, was he? No, got lost in the cracks. And there were many other suspects considered, weren't there? Correct. And the Orient tip sheet in this case showed that he was clear from the very beginning, didn't it? That's what the tip sheet said. If you remember, Kathy Shank said there was a note saying that he had been cleared on the tip sheet that she found that suddenly made her think he was guilty. So someone put lead cleared. Yes? Or yes. He says someone put lead cleared. Yes, that was his answer. Sorry. Well, someone on your team, right? What do you mean by my team? Well, somebody working for the police. Evidently, yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I believe it was a dispatcher. So, the processing of the information involving that initial interview with Mr. Doolin is the primary reason for the long delay in focusing on him. Is that right? One more time, please. The processing, or lack of processing, with that initial tip from Mr. Doolin is the reason for the delay. Is that your position at this point? I'm saying that it kind of fell in the cracks. Someone cleared that lead and it shouldn't have been. Okay. So we agree there was a delay, right? Yes. And you would agree, as an investigator, that puts you in a situation where you have to try to go back and essentially recreate something that happened. In this case, 5 years prior, right? Correct. And that's difficult to do, isn't it? Because some difficulties, causes some difficulties, doesn't it? In what way? Well, it's a lot harder to investigate than something that's fresh, isn't it? Yeah, it would have been helpful to have these interviews and talks right then. Yes. Right. For example, one of the things that's challenging is that now you're asking Rick Allen 5 years later to try and accurately recall everything he said in 2017, right? Correct. So for him to not be perfect about a date or a time would not be unreasonable, would it? With a 5-year delay? Correct. Same thing for his wife, right? Asking her to recall what happened in 2017 is challenging for somebody, isn't it? Can be, yes. And the same thing for the witnesses involved in this case, right? Yes. So, as it pertains to some of those witnesses, it's arguable that what they reported to the police in this case would have been accurate, more accurate, back at the time that it was reported, right? Correct. So, asking them what they remember now comes with the passage of time. Correct. And all the taint from all the outside information that people are are taking in, right? Correct. So, do you agree with that? I don't know what outside information they're talking about, but well, everything that's on social media, how's that for a start? I don't get on social media, so well, are you aware that this case has been covered on social media? Like whether you're on it or not, buddy, it's happening. So I'm just going to ignore social media and pretend it doesn't exist, and therefore it doesn't involve or impact my case in any way whatsoever. That's not how the world works, but okay. He says, oh, very much so. Well, do you think some of the witnesses have watched some of that stuff? I don't know. You're also trying to seek out physical evidence that would have existed 5 years ago, right? Correct. Now, 7. That's challenging, isn't it? Yes. And one of those examples would be the firearm that you recovered from Mr. Allen's home, right? What about it? Well, you had to seek out that evidence in this case, right? Correct. The Sig Sauer P226. Correct. And you acknowledge that the gun existed back in 2017. It was on planet Earth? Correct. And it actually existed from several years prior to that, right? Correct. And do you agree with me that you don't know what the condition of that gun was back in 2017, do you? That's not my field of expertise. I don't know what it was like the day we got it. I didn't look at it. So when you collected it in October of 2022, would you agree with me? Did you look at it then? I saw it, yes. Okay, there's no way to determine what the condition of that gun was like back in 2017, right? I assume. I don't know. If it had been fired multiple times between 2017 and 2022, could have changed the condition of the gun, right? Not my area of expertise. Will you carry a gun? I do. On a regular basis? I absolutely do. Do you have any qualification? All right, well, that sucked. My streaming software just completely crashed on me while I was in the middle of reading this, and of course it did. So I'm going to go back because I don't know if it got everything, so I'm just going to go back a couple questions. So maybe even fair to say tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands? Yes. And that is one of the most common ways in the modern age of law enforcement investigation to solve crimes, isn't it? Objection. Form of the question. Sustained. Well, you're an investigator, right? You've investigated crimes? Yes. Do you use cell phones all the time when you solve crimes? Yes. There's no digital evidence in this case that connects Richard Allen to the crime scene, is there? No, but that's what's interesting is he said he was on his phone while he was on the trail, but there's no evidence of that either. Yeah, there isn't. No. Stock ticker, right? Stock ticker. You also don't know the time of death of those girls, do you? No. You got to lean on the pathologist when it comes to those kinds of decisions. Objection, Judge. It calls for speculation and the form of the question. Overruled. You got to what? You got to rely on the pathologist to come to those kind of judgment calls, right? He's the expert, so to speak, for that. So there were clothes missing from that scene? Yes. Some of the clothes that you believe that either Abby Williams or Libby German was wearing on the day that before that they went out on the trail. Correct. Those clothes have never been recovered, right? No. Not down there at the crime scene? No. Not at Richard Allen's house? No. That man right there held himself out to law enforcement just a few days after the crime, didn't he? A few days after, yes. So there's nothing unreasonable about that, was there? How do you mean? Well, you started asking for help, asking the public for help a day or two after the girls were found, right? I don't know his motive, why he came forward. I'm not asking you to say why he did this. Listen to my question, sir. The law enforcement community started asking the public for help. Yes, shortly after the girls were found. Correct. And so, him reporting this, that he was out there a couple days later, would be at least consistent with that timing, right? Yeah. And you're not aware of any evidence that exists in this case that Mr. Allen engaged in any kind of behaviors in the days before February 13th, premeditated behaviors that suggested he had an interest in taking those girls' lives that I'm aware of? No. And then after this happened, you're not aware of any information that suggests that he fled this community, are you? Say that one more time, please. After you found the girls. Thank you. Okay. It was a poor question. I'll withdraw it. Would you agree with me that after you found the girls, there's no information that suggests that he fled the community? Correct. He stayed right here, didn't he? Correct. In fact, he worked right down the road at CVS, hiding in plain sight. I appreciate that. Those aren't your words, are they? No. So you're adopting somebody else's thoughts now, right? Yes. Mr. Carter? Yes. So those are Mr. Carter's words, hiding in plain sight, that he's spoken repeatedly to the public when asking for their help, saying that he's hiding in plain sight, and now Tony Liggett is repeating his words and admitting it. And you testified earlier that you thought it was interesting that he backed his car into the CVS parking spot, right? Yes. There's really two ways to park a car, right? Correct. Okay. One of them is that you pull into a parking spot in a forward direction, right? Correct. And the other one is you back into a parking spot? Correct. Maybe there's a third parallel parking, right? Okay. So there's a 50% chance he's going to back into the to that lot, right? He's had to do one or the other. At CVS? Yes. Correct. So 7 years later, you believe that it's pertinent that he backed into this parking spot at the CVS. I didn't say it was pertinent, I noted it. But you testified about it, right? Right. And it proves nothing. Now, you're aware that Mr. Allen, early on in this case, will strike that, when Mr. Allen was arrested in October of 2022, he was immediately detained right here across the street and in your jail, wasn't he? Yes. So he was at the Carroll County Jail originally. A pretty small jail, right? Yes. In comparison, I mean, how many people do you have there? 20, 30 inmates? 34? We can hold 34 and we consistently have over 50. You ever held anybody in there that's been accused of a violent crime? Judge, may we approach? Yes. How many more times does Nick McClellan have to whine and bitch to the judge like, Judge, we don't like where this is going, so we need to have a little sidebar. And she gives it to them, of course. Mr. McClellan says, I'm just trying to be a little proactive because once the jury hears it, inaudible. But Mr. Rosie's now moving on to the safekeeping and him being in the DOC, and that's outside the scope of direct. Mr. Rosie said, he said he was familiar with the facts and circumstances surrounding this investigation. A big part of the investigation has been them babysitting him at the prison and recording everything that he says. Court says, but the issue is it's beyond the scope of his direct. That's what he's saying. Mr. Rosie says, but in his direct, twice, he said he was familiar with all the facts and circumstances involving the investigation. He asked him that. Court says, well, I know he did. He didn't get into that, though. Is that where you're going with this? Yeah, that's where I'm going. Okay, says the judge. I mean, the court says, specific. Mr. McClellan says, there's an objection. It's outside the scope. I understand you want to get into the safekeeping or whatever you call it, and you can do it that, but that's beyond the scope of where we are at this time. Mr. Rosie says, I think he opened with direct, says Mr. McClelland. Rosie goes on and says, my point I'm making is I think he opened the door to that now. Of course, I'm going to recall him later. Okay, you can do that, says the court. You can recall him then on your case in chief. Whatever. Miss, Mr. Rosie says, I'm just saying, I don't want to sit here and have a tizzy about it all over. Court says, okay. Mr. Rosie says, I think when he asked him that broad question, you guys opened the door. The court says, well, it's beyond the scope specifically now, so I sustain your objection. Wow. Nick McClelland is such an ass kisser, and Judge Gall apparently thinks the sun shines out of Nick's ass. Sidebar conference concluded. Mr. Rosie says, we'll return to that conversation. 1 second, Your Honor. I asked you about this earlier because we kind of touched on this. Well, actually, strike that. You testified earlier that there was one 40 caliber round recovered from Mr. Allen's home, right? Correct. There was actually several 40 caliber rounds recovered from his home, wasn't there? Right. The other was Blazer, correct. Yeah, so there was a Smith& Wesson that was recovered from his closet. Right. A Winchester, correct? Oh no, he says a Winchester, correct. Winchester, Smith& Wesson, right? Correct. Pretty common round in terms of ammunition, right? I'm not a big gun guy. I don't know. I can't answer that. It's absolutely common. Have you ever heard of Smith& Wesson? Yeah, sure. It's one of the most popular brands in the firearm business. Absolutely. And Winchester is also, right? Yes. There was a second round recovered from the closet, was there not? Are we talking about the closet or the keepsake box? The closet, because both of them were recovered from the closet. Winchester round, Blazer round. No, I don't know about the closet. Okay, fair enough. Were there two rounds that were solo, free floating rounds? I know of one. I don't know of the others. There were a lot of things taken. I don't know if there was another one. I don't know of that. There were also a number of Blazer rounds taken from some magazines that were in the house, right? Correct. And those were also all 40 caliber rounds? Correct. Sent to the lab for testing? They were sent to the lab. I'm not sure what testing they did with them. And let's talk about the bullet that was recovered from the crime scene, okay? Okay. Do you agree with me? Have you seen the photos of that bullet? Yes. And how many photos do you think you've seen in your mind? How many do you think you've seen different photos if you had to estimate? The photos that I've seen are from the lab. You haven't seen the ones from the crime scene? I don't think I've seen the pictures from the crime scene. No. I mean, it's that bullet that ultimately led to your arrest of Mr. Allen, right? That was part of it. Yes. He's never seen the crime scene photos of the bullet being recovered. Well, there are none of it being recovered. There's just one of it or a couple of it in the ground. And not you can't see a good angle, you can't really see much of it. Part of the tip is in the ground, embedded in it. You can't see. So it's hard to visualize. And then they did not take pictures of it recovered or fully like laid out on a table later. Yeah. When you got the result back from the lab, that's when you decided we're arresting this guy. I think that's kind of what put us over the hump. Yes. Yeah, but the bullet, he probably wouldn't be in jail. But for the bullet, he probably wouldn't be in jail, right? Not true. Well, he wouldn't have been in jail in October of 2022, correct? I can't say that. Well, you wouldn't have arrested him on that day if you didn't have that bullet. I can't say that. This is a very difficult witness. He just doesn't want to give the defense attorney an inch. Well, what other information would have supported his arrest at that point? The fact that the three girls saw him walking in, that he was on the Hoosier Harvest Store video at 127, they pass him at 126, Betsy Blair sees him on the bridge, Sarah Carbow sees him on 300 North, and we have a bullet. None of those things are facts. I mean, they do have a bullet, but that's about the only thing. Betsy Blair saw a man who was boyish to her. Remember that? Yeah. How old was he at the time? In his 40s. Betsy Blair saw a man that was youthful. To her, is his answer. She saw a man with brown, poofy hair, right? Witnesses. All the witnesses describe it a little bit different. Even the three girls that were together, their story was a little bit different. Well, she saw a man with brown, poofy hair, didn't she? I believe that's what she said. In his 20s or 30s. Yes. Is there anything wrong with just believing that she had to say, uh, is there anything wrong with just believing what she had to say about the identity of that person? Is it proper to just believe she saw what she saw? Is it proper to believe I believe what, withdraw the question. I believe what she saw. So you think she's a credible person? Yes. Okay. And her description does not fit the description of Mr. Allen, does it? But again, neither does the three girls that saw him at the same time. Right. Exactly. Right. 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 There's a lot of rights. Let's talk about that. This Mr. Rosie says, "One second, Your Honor. Nick, do you have the exhibit that was taken from the bench?" No, I do not. Do you think it's up here? Because I'm not seeing it. I know you used it earlier. Oh, here it is. I apologize. You said earlier, Mr. McClelland asked you about the significance of that photograph that was taken by one of those girls on the bench at the trail, sorry, right? Correct. And that photograph is very significant in your timeline. You said that earlier, didn't you? Correct. And you said that because your belief that those girls uh, saw a bridge guy on the trail shortly after the photograph was taken. Correct. Photograph was taken at 1:26 in the afternoon, wasn't it? Correct. What time was the black car on the Hoosier Harvest Store video? 1:27. So a minute later? Correct. Headed west? Correct. So it's very plausible that whoever was in the black car was not seen on the trail after those girls got off that bench, right? No. The car was out of the roadway a minute after they took that picture. Correct. Going in the opposite direction, right? They passed him between having the bench and the Freedom Bridge. Betsy Blair sees the same three girls. She's on video at 1:46 returning. So if you count in 2 minutes of Betsy Blair seeing them when they're walking on the trail near the Freedom Bridge, maybe they left at 1:44. But that's you making up all those things in the middle. It's absolutely not making it up. It is absolutely, but that's your version of this evidence. No, it's on video. 1 second, please. Rick Allen said he saw three girls on the trail. All right, well, something is definitely going on with OBS, my streaming software, because it's crashed a second time, but we're going to keep going. So we are beginning redirect examination of Sheriff Tony Liggett. Sheriff Liggett, says Mr. McClelland, I got a little confused, and so I want to make sure I've got the information right. When you searched the home of Richard Allen, was there a bullet found in a hope box in his room? Correct. What kind of bullet was in the hope box? A 40 caliber Winchester. Was there other 40 caliber ammunition found in the house? I know of Blazer. There was Blazer. Where was that, Sorry, I'm sorry. Go ahead. That was in the magazines. I don't know of any other that I know of. Okay. So let me make sure I clarify that. We've got the bullet in the Hope box. There was also 40 caliber ammunition found in the firearm? Correct. The firearm that you found, correct? Correct. The 40 caliber Sig Sauer firearm. Correct. Make sure we're talking about the right firearm. The ammunition in that firearm was what kind? Blazer. I think you testified, but this is where I'm unclear. Were there also magazines with that firearm? I knew of the one that was in it. What's a magazine? I believe so that's what holds the bullets and goes into the butt of the handle of the gun. You refer to it as magazines. Maybe I'm using the wrong terminology. Mags. Yes. Okay, there was one in the gun. Correct. Were there others with the gun? I believe there was one other. And the ammunition that was in those magazines, what kind of ammunition was it? Mr. Rosie says something that is inaudible. The court says, I'm sorry, what was your. Then he says, I'll withdraw, thank you. Mr. McClellan says, sorry, didn't hear, Judge. The ammunition that was in the magazines, what brand of ammunition was that? I believe it was Blazer. Okay, so did you find any other 40 caliber ammunition that was Smith& Wesson Winchester brand in the house besides what was in the Hope box? Not to my knowledge, no. Okay, all right. Next, Mr. Rosie had asked you a series of questions, and it seemed to imply that someone's memory closer in time to the action or the incident will be better than 5 years later. You remember that line of questioning? Yes. And do you agree with that, that somebody's memory close in time to an incident is better than recalling what happened 5 years later? I do. And so, going with that reasoning, would it be fair to assume that Mr. Allen's memory, I'll rephrase the question, in your opinion, is Mr. Allen's memory better closer in time to the incident or 5 years later? Yes, and I believe that, and he believes that too. He said that in the interview of October 2022 that he said the same thing. And his memory closer in time to the incident, he was on the trail at what time? 1:30 to 3:30. And then he changed that 5 years later to what time? Noon to 1:30. This 1:30 to 3 is word of mouth by Captain Dan Doolin, who never took any, or maybe took notes. He did take notes, but we don't see the notes. They've been transcribed somehow, and we're supposed to believe that Richard Allen told him 1:30 to 3:30 at that time, when in his interviews and everything, he's always said 12 to 1, or noon to 1:30. Mr. McClellan says, I don't have any other questions, Judge Mr. Rosie, the court says, and there will be some recross. So, what Betsy Blair saw and some of the description of that man on that bridge that day would be the best evidence of what that man looked like, right? Correct. A 20 to 30-year-old man. Correct. Almost twice the age of Rick Allen, right? From her perspective, yes. Well, she's entitled to a perspective, isn't she? Absolutely, but well, she was closer than anybody else. Her perspective is, right? Her perspective is, no, that's not true. Sarah Carbow was closer than anybody else. What? Sarah Carbow was off on a road and driving at a pace when what's her face actually was like standing and saw him above her on the bridge when she was walking. Anyways, Betsy Blair saw the man like like she's face to face. They're eyeballing each other, and yet Sarah Carbow, I guess, has the closer perspective. I don't know. Well, let them decide what they think about her perspective. You asked. You talked about those. Mr. McClellan asked you about those other rounds in that house, right? Right. Do you remember or do you agree with me that there was never a determination by your firearms examiner that suggested that there was any sufficient agreement between the marks on any of those rounds and the one found on the crime scene? I'm gonna object, Your on Judge McClellan uh, chimes in. He's not in a position to be able to answer that question. Mr. Rosie says the court says sustained. How does he know? He's the witness, says Mr. Rosie. The court says, there's an expert, correct? Correct, Your Honor, says Mr. McClellan. Sustained, says the judge. So because there's a firearms expert that he could go into this with, he can't ask this witness anything firearms related, apparently. Did you read the report? Read what report? Ms. Oberg's report. That will be Melissa Oberg is the firearms examiner who's going to be on the stand for days. Well, she's on the stand for a while, maybe not days. So he says, yes, I read that lab report. The 14-page report, I don't remember how many pages it was. May I ask that question again now that he's read the report? If he can recall. I'm sorry? The court says if he recalls, but again, we have an expert that will testify to that, correct? Mr. McClellan says, correct, Judge, and the state's position is the expert's in the best position to answer those questions. Mr. Rosie says, yeah, she is. You're right. We'll do that tomorrow. I withdraw it. Thank you. Any other questions? You mentioned this hope box earlier, right? Hope box, keepsake box, something like that. Those are your words. A keepsake box. Correct. What does it look like? It was a wooden box. Okay. And it had things like a wristband. It just seemed like something that people kept important things in. Okay. And are you aware of any connection between the marks on that round in that box and the firearm that was recovered from Mr. Allen's home? I'm not. No. I don't have any other questions. Does anybody on the jury have any questions for Sheriff Liggett? Asks the judge. There is no response or indication from any juror. Court says no. All right. Thank you, Sheriff. You may step down. The witness says thank you. Court says, do we want to take a break? Yes, Judge, says McClelland. The court says, all right, ladies and gentlemen, this is an appropriate time for us to take our afternoon recess. While you're outside the courtroom, please keep your minds open. Please don't form any opinions or conclusions about anything. You may discuss the evidence that you've heard so far, but please only do that if all 16 of you are present in the jury room at the same time, and please don't deliberate. Gentlemen, how does she remember that whole thing like verbatim, word for word? She says, all rise. The jury leaves. The court says, all right, let's take 15 minutes. Jody, you can go off the record. And that's where we're going to end today. Yeah, because the next portion is about the next witness. So we'll end right here. Thank you guys so much for watching and enjoying this crazy trial with me. It has been a little wild, and I feel like I'm going insane listening to some of this gaslighting testimony going on by some of these witnesses. What do you think? Do you think there's gaslighting going on in this test or in this trial? Let me know in the comments below. And be sure you are subscribed. Hit that like button if you haven't done so already. And I will see you guys Monday for who's up next? We have David Vito, Jerry Holman, and potentially we might start Melissa Oberg, but she might also get her own. I'm not sure how I broke it down. But anyways, so we've got a couple more. Jerry Holman, Lieutenant Holman, and then can't wait to hear his, but he's only on for a very short time. And then the firearms expert, which we're leading up to. The way that this, I want to say, so, okay, so they don't have really a case for Richard Allen, but yet the way that this case has been laid out sequentially, I don't know, maybe I'm just not used to a case being laid out like this when I'm so used to Karen Reed and free for all that they've done with all the witnesses and stuff. This this feels like one witness leads to the next, leads to the next. Like in that regard, I think it makes sense, but I hate all these witnesses for the state. Maybe hate's a strong word, but I dislike a lot of them immensely because of the lying and the gaslighting and the garbage that they're spewing out of their mouths, like Tony Liggett, who can't even answer a gosh darn question like, you could be wrong, right? Like, it's a possibility you could be wrong. No, I'm not wrong. I'm never wrong. Like, basically on the stand. So that's what I think of Tony Liggett. We will get into more next time. Again, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye now.